Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast, where we help you improve your English speaking, listening, and confidence. I'm your host, Jason, and today we have an exciting topic for you: unlocking your fluent English brain. And of course, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Julia. Hey, Julia.
Hey Jason, hi everyone. I'm super excited about today's episode because we're going to break down the secrets to thinking and speaking in English naturally without hesitation.
Yes, and let me ask our listeners a quick question. Do you ever feel like your brain just stops working when you try to speak English? Maybe you know the words, you know the grammar, but when it's time to talk, boom! Your mind goes blank. If that sounds familiar, don't worry. You're not alone.
That's so true. A lot of English learners struggle with this, and it's not because they're bad at English, it's because their brain isn't trained to think in English yet. But don't worry. Today, we'll show you how to train your brain to unlock fluency and speak English more naturally and confidently.
Exactly. By the end of this episode, you'll learn powerful techniques to stop translating in your head, think in English faster, and speak fluently without overthinking. So, get ready.
And before we start, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you find today's tips helpful, share this with a friend who's also learning English.
All right. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about why speaking English feels difficult for many learners. Julia, why do so many people struggle with fluency? All right, Julia, let's start by addressing the big question. Why do so many English learners struggle to speak fluently? Even when they know a lot of words and grammar, they still find it hard to talk naturally. Why is that?
Great question, Jason. The truth is, speaking English isn't just about knowing words and grammar. It's about training your brain to think in English. And most learners don't train their brain the right way. That's why they feel stuck when they try to speak.
That makes a lot of sense. I've heard so many English learners say things like, "I can understand English, but I can't speak it." Or, "I know the words, but when I try to talk, my brain freezes."
Exactly. And there are three main reasons for this: overthinking, lack of practice, and fear of making mistakes. Let's break them down one by one.
Good idea. Let's start with overthinking. A lot of English learners translate every sentence in their head before they speak. Instead of thinking in English naturally, they're trying to find the right words in their native language first.
Yes, and that takes too much time. Imagine if you had to translate every word when you're having a conversation. It would be exhausting. That's why so many learners speak slowly or hesitate too much.
Right. And that leads to the second problem: lack of practice. Many learners focus too much on studying English, but not enough on using it in real life. They read books, memorize grammar rules, but they don't actually speak English every day.
That's a huge issue. Speaking is like a muscle. You have to train it regularly to get stronger. If you don't practice speaking, your brain won't get comfortable forming sentences quickly.
And that brings us to the third reason: fear of making mistakes. A lot of learners are afraid of saying something wrong or sounding silly. So, instead of speaking, they stay quiet.
Yes, but the truth is, mistakes are a natural part of learning. Even native speakers make mistakes all the time. If you're too afraid to talk, you'll never give your brain the chance to improve.
Absolutely. So, to summarize, overthinking, lack of practice, and fear of mistakes are the biggest reasons why speaking English feels difficult. But don't worry, We're going to show you how to fix all of these problems and unlock your fluent English brain.
Yes. And the secret is understanding how your brain learns languages. So let's move on to the next section, the science of unlocking a fluent English brain.
Now that we know why speaking English feels difficult, let's talk about how your brain actually learns a language and what you can do to unlock fluency faster. Julia, have you ever noticed how babies learn languages compared to adults?
Oh, absolutely. Babies don't sit down with a grammar book or memorize word lists. Instead, they listen, imitate, and repeat words naturally without even thinking about it.
Exactly. And that's because their brains are wired for language learning. But here's the interesting part. Adults can train their brains to learn English the same way. The key is to stop thinking about English as a school subject and start treating it like a real-life skill.
That's so true. And there's actually a scientific reason why this works. When you speak a language, your brain uses something called neural pathways. The more you use English, the stronger these pathways become, making it easier and faster to speak without hesitation.
Right. Think of it like a road in your brain. If you rarely use English, the road is small and slow. But the more you practice, the road gets bigger and smoother, so your thoughts flow in English naturally.
I love that example. And here's another cool fact. When you think in English instead of translating, you activate a different part of your brain, the same part that native speakers use. This helps you speak faster and more naturally.
That's why it's so important to train your brain to think in English. The more you do it, the easier fluency becomes. But here's the mistake many learners make. They think they need to learn more words and grammar first. In reality, they need to activate their fluency pathways by actually speaking more.
Yes, and that's why today we're going to give you some powerful brain training techniques that will help you stop translating, start thinking in English, and speak more fluently.